good motorcycle. He's been to New York and Chicago and up through Canada and down to Texas.
I was a sound engineer.
1984.
And I was a specialist in sound.
And he's been to the Lucas Ranch many, many, many times. They know it.
I have several patents in the electronics area in devices relating to sound. Skywalker Sound, that's the name of the first company, was very interested in sound. So they needed somebody who would who had that background. One of the engineers who worked on the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest knew me, and he asked me out for an interview at the ranch, and I became the EditDroid coordinator, which was a sound droid to begin with, and then the EditDroid developed from that as a picture editing thing. Because they didn't know exactly what to do. There was no EditDroid at that time. There was no, we weren't sure how we were going to get a thing that was made for sound basically into editing for pictures and then out to the Skywalker Ranch. And so I was the coordinator. And it became my job to figure out how to do that.
And again, the beautiful way he keeps all his buildings out of sight. You don't even see them.
Yeah, works pretty well.
We may have to stop here. I think it'll open. I don't think you have to. Just drive up a little bit. Just see if it opens. Yeah.
Okay, and your name, sir?
Sinclair, John Sinclair. I have only got one picture of George Lucas on the droid. You were asking how involved he was. He was involved enough that he would come and sit and look and watch and ask how we were doing. And George Lucas is not a technical guy, but he has these ideas that this should be possible. And it's certainly here he had an idea that this should be possible.
The interface between the editor and the EditDroid was a device called the touchpad. And it was really based on the controller on a flatbed chem film editing machine. You had a switch and a rotating controller, like a throttle. It had a neutral position where the image would stand still on the screen. And then as you moved it forward, the image would speed up until you reached the proper playing speed. And if you went really far with the control, you could zip, you could fast forward or rewind through material. So you controlled the image in front of you with this touchpad controller. And then when you found a frame that you wanted to mark where you wanted the first frame of a cut to be, you had a little button, which was an in cut, button. And then when you found a frame which was the end cut, you had another button you could press it. So that would mark in the memory of the EditDroid, those are the beginnings and end of a clip that you want to cut together.
Everything in one hand, cut head, cut tail, splice, and you would have a video source and the result of your cut on another monitor, and then you would see what you were doing on another screen, very much like looking at a computer.
You had a graphical interface which had a timeline, and you had a picture track, and you had 2 audio tracks. We might have had 4 at one time. And that represented the view that you would have in traditional film editing if you were on a bench with rewinds and a synchronizer, which was a device which locked the picture and the tracks together. That image was then graphically taken and put on the screen. And that was the original justification for how the screen looked. It was to give the editor something familiar to the film world that it was replacing. We didn't have a mouse, did we? We had a trackball. We had a trackball which moved the cursor around on the screen to the various buttons, and then you had a button beneath the trackball, which was the command button. And it all seemed very strange because this really was before we had home computers. This idea that all your decisions were a bunch of video images of buttons was a very strange one. And I can remember first looking at it and saying, what sense does that make? That's really strange. Because up to that point, buttons were something physically that you touched. You reached over and you pressed it, or you pulled something with your hand, or you flipped a switch or something. And this idea that the commands were just on a screen, and that you moved, like in a little video game, you moved a little cursor, and then you said, I want that one. That was a very strange concept at first. And I can remember looking at it thinking, is this going to really make sense to anybody? So it was all new, but obviously it was the precursor to what we do every day now on our cell phones or anything else. You make decisions by, navigating on a screen to the command location you want to go to. With film, you saw your results. You physically had material in your hands. You could hold the film up and look at it, and you could touch the soundtrack. You could smell it. You actually could taste it, because sometimes you had to decide whether you had base or emulsion up on the film. So there was a real physical interaction with the material. But when you went to the EditDroid, everything now was represented by symbols on a screen. And that took some adaptation for people. It did for me.